Welcome, gentlemen, to another exciting episode of LEG TV, keeping a pulse on the fantasy football season. We are at week 10. Yes, we are inching ever closer to the playoffs, and we had some pretty outstanding results last week. Let's go to the scoreboard and see what happened in week 9. Barely pulling off a win there, 160 to 143. Definitely thought Plow was going to catch me there. That was the game of the week. Plow moves from second to third. I still remain in first. And then poor Adam Barris can't catch a break. What's going on with Patrick Mahomes? 128 to 146. Dan Nickel gets the win, now moving to 5-4 and in the 6th spot there in the top 6 for playoff contention. Austin Stoll gets a big win over Dahlgren thanks to CJ Stroud. Holy cow. 173 to 137 over Dahlgren. More injuries. They had that trade, and now Dallas Goedert is injured. That was hilarious. Cook Goose for everyone gets up. He gets the big win against Anu, and now he's at 6-3 in 4th place. Feels a goal. Nick Shook, the lowest output this last week, 108 to 143 from Joe Murdoch, getting another win, 4-5, looking him creeping up to 7th place, right outside playoff contention. And Avalash Reddy loses a heartbreaker to Jabel Souls Medelavirus, who moves to 2nd place at 6-3, as Jabel barely holds on Monday night, 166 to 164. And as I mentioned, here's a real quick snapshot of the standings currently. You can see the top 6 teams there. We still have Red Hot Chili Peppers at 7-2, trying to lock in that number 1 slot. And then we have 3 6-3 teams, Jabel, Plow, and Nick, all at 2, 3, and 4. Right at 5th place, John Dahlgren, who was just in 1st place a couple weeks ago, now dropped to 5th at 5-4. And Dan Nickel now at 5-4 in that 6th spot. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. We have about 4 or 5 teams that are still in it. Joe Murdoch, Abalash Reddy, Dr. Anu, and even Nick Shook still has a chance there. 4-5, and Nick at 3-6. He has lost 3 in a row, which has not been great since going 3-3 to start the season. Poor Dak Street Boys, 2-7, and even more lowly, Adam Barris down there at the bottom on a 2-game skid. Well, we've got a very pivotal, very important, exciting week, and I am very, very pleased to bring on this week's guest for the LEG TV Owner Spotlight. All right, welcome to this week's LEG Owner Spotlight, and I am very pleased to be joined by 3-time LEG champion and 2-time OFFA winner, Mr. Austin Stoll from Air Traffic Control Tower. How are you doing, Mr. Stoll?
Weather's good up here, JD. Was a little cloudy this morning, a little bit of rain, but skies cleared up, so air's looking good up here.
God, man, you do it all. There's nothing you can't do. That's amazing. Mr. Stoll, I brought you on. As you know, you either finished 1st place or last place in this league. Given the current circumstances, how are you feeling about the squad this year?
I think this year I wasn't at the draft. I had to work. So I think that was a little bit of an issue.
It sure was.
So that made it hard for me to draft. I was able to do, the earlier rounds, but I I will admit my drafting personally has not been good. I think so. Last year, when when you don't finish first, you finish last, and I take that quite literally. So,
We do.
I had a very terrible draft last year, and then I also didn't care. So, I really appreciate the $100 you slipped me. You said don't win again. The league's falling apart. So I said okay. I won't care. And so then I got last, and then the league just invigorated. I didn't win, and suddenly the league's like popping again. So, but yeah, I think I didn't draft very well last year. I wasn't on the waiver wire like I have been in my previous years when I've won, because I think every championship game that I had, I was picking up players from the waiver wire that actually like carried the team down the stretch. Like,
Yes.
Devontae Parker comes to mind, Logan Thomas comes to mind, just some of those guys. But this year, I think it hurt not being there, and then in the later round, like mid to late rounds, we actually got really busy, so then I couldn't be on it all. And I think I auto drafted like the back half of my team, so that hurt. So we were reeling a little bit. I think I've found a little bit of stability at this point. We'll just have to kind of see how everything pans out for me down the stretch. I should have got back on track last week, but Sam Howell decided to throw, for 40, 50 points against the Eagles, because the Eagles said, whatever.
We don't care this week.
Right, exactly. But what can you do?
That's true. Now, you still are mathematically not eliminated from playoff contention. We're going to kind of touch on that. I want to kind of get your opinion, champ. Who are the teams or team that you really think is scary to look out for, that you're really worried about, that you expect to see around post-Christmas time playing in the championship?
I mean, I think the top teams are the top teams for a reason. I'm looking at like, are you red hot? Yeah. I'm just looking at your team. It's pretty solid. Joe Burrow figured it out, right? The Bengals remembered how to play football again. That helps a lot. And then I think, when Kyren Williams comes back.
And Devin Achane.
Yeah.
Achane.
Well, I think Achane is a toss up a little bit, just because Miami, they just figure out how to do stuff, and he got hot, but how's he going to be after you? But I mean, like, Jaylen Warren is a very solid pickup. Like, Najee Harris just fell off the map, which is disgusting, because he actually helped me win a championship. And then I put trust in him again this year. I'm like, okay, they're going to run the ball, protect Pickett. No, they didn't do that. So, I don't think there's any team that just, you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, like they're going to just steamroll everybody. But I think, obviously the upper teams, they've got very solid squads. I think consistency is kind of the theme now versus the past few years. It's been splash. It's been, it was easy to find consistent players, and it was finding the right ones. Like, who's going to have the big week? You're looking at matchups a little bit more, but now it's like, who's actually going to just actually play football, not injury related, but it's like, I think I saw a stat that 61% of the games have hit the under this year.
Wow.
So not a lot of people are scoring points, which means it's really hard for us to so it's like the consistency is like a huge problem now. It's because like you think you're locked in. You're like, oh, great, I've got somebody solid here. And then they score like 10 points and win the game. And it's like you're watching Big Ten West football in the NFL now. It's like, oh my gosh, like 10-7. That's it, huh?
The Iowa games are always like the over under is 12, I think.
Oh yeah.
Did you see the stat that at Wrigley Field, the top scoring games, and like there were 7 Cubs games above that Iowa game at Wrigley Field? Oh, it's pathetic. That is absolutely pathetic. But so, no, you're right. Scoring has been hard to come by a lot more this season. Bringing the stats to the program. I like to hear that. So I guess last question before we get into the rundown, Mr. Stoll, give me a bold prediction. Who do you see in the championship, and who do you see in the Hoffa?
Well, I think Hoffa wise, I think I won't actually make that. I think I'll get out of it.
Ooh,
I know it's
okay.
surprising. I think Shook's in true form. He had an injury or a bye week player in his lineup this past week. He's in true form. So um I think he's gunning for it again, which is fantastic. So I think he'll take that this year. Like I said, my team, I finally kind of figured out a lineup where I'm heating up. And if you look at my points, I'm kind of like middle of the pack
Yeah,
versus the bottom, like I was last year.
it's true.
So I'm not super worried about that. I think Shook, unless he wakes up and remembers, like, oh yeah, I gotta set my lineup today.
He
Um,
has been traveling to Europe some,
right.
which
I'm
I'm
pretty sure
impressed.
he's back.
Yeah,
So
you're
he's
right.
been
He has
back.
been
Like
back
he
for a
like
couple
his
weeks.
lineup was good while he was in Europe, and he comes back. He's been back, and he's like, oh, never mind. So like I'm
Yes,
like right now. Let's see,
it's
because he's
Chicago
projected
Bears fandom syndrome. It just makes you depressed to be a
right. Yeah,
Chicago
he's
Bears
got
fan.
Kelsey still in his lineup. I know it's Thursday, but
It's Thursday. Yes.
he's got two defensive players, and then Kelsey on bye this week, and he doesn't have Joe Mixon in, who played last week.
Mm-hmm.
Curtis Samuel over Jahad Dotson. So Curtis Samuel was out, and Jahan Dotson I scored like 20 points. So like I don't know what he's doing. So he's in true Hoffa form right now, though. So that's pretty nice.
That's
Um,
right. Now, who? Give me your bold prediction for who you think's going to take this thing.
like I said, I'm looking at teams, and it's the consistency issue. I don't see like week to week. You just don't
Yeah.
know. Like I mean, your quarterback play and some of your wide receivers, you're like okay, but like running backs, unless you have like two of the guys out there, uh, I don't think they're gonna do much of anything. It's just like I really I it's the championship's a lot harder just because there's teams. I'm looking at all the teams right now, and it's like
Yeah.
there's I mean flip a coin. You could
Yeah.
have like I'm looking at Sam Howell,
Yeah.
40. So he had an 8-point game against the fucking Giants, and then he turns around and goes 44 against the Eagles, and then he goes back to the Patriots and does 22, which is like average. So it's like
Yeah.
where's your and then I'm looking at like he's had a negative point game, he's had big games, he's had bad games, like like
Yeah.
wide receiver. I mean, it's just the championship is really hard. I mean, I would just say based on just the standings themselves, like obviously I think you have a good chance of being in there, and I think Jabol's got a good
Yeah.
chance. I think he's got a pretty good team. He's got Najee Harris in there. I mean,
What do you do with
I don't know.
old Najee Harris?
I dropped him, and of course he starts having like a little bit more consistent games. But like, he can go right back to the 5-point games too. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it could be really bad. So
I'm just waiting for Jaylen Warren to take over. They just need to stop and just give Jaylen Warren the bell cow carries and maybe just give, Najee the short yardage situations. That's what I'm waiting for.
well, I mean, I think the thing is Jaylen Warren's getting the catches. Najee Harris isn't seeing
Yeah.
a lot of receptions, and
It's
that
true.
like I looked at, Jaylen Warren, for his last week, his points was like 14 or 15 points, but he only had like 30 yards on the ground. But it's just the PPR is so nice, and like he gets all of it. Najee
Yeah.
Harris barely sees any of it. So I think Jaylen Warren's like a better play, and that's one of the things. It's like the weird consistency thing. Like Najee Harris is a clear starter. I think he's a better back, but Jaylen Warren gets the third down, and like Kenny Pickett's a coin flip quarterback, so
Yeah.
he dumps it off, and you're the beneficiary of it. But it could be different. Like George it's just like one of the reasons I traded George Pickens. Like he had some big games, he looked enticing, but then he had a stinker, like a 1-point game when I played against him, and that's what he had been doing. So it's like you just don't know.
Yes.
So I mean, I'm gonna cop out. I'm gonna say the top two teams right now, you and J-Bull, I think are consistent enough to get there. But I mean, it's anyone's game.
Yes, and thank you for reminding me about the trade. I do owe you a public apology for pooping all over the trade, thinking that it was a completely lopsided trade. Now, granted, the Zach Moss, obviously, he's going to completely go away. That's just going to happen. However, DeAndre Hopkins looks like you got the better of that deal. And then poor Dahlgren, whose team's really good, but snake bitten and loses, Justin Jefferson. But in this trade, Dallas Goedert goes out. He's got to get surgery.
Yeah.
He's out for like 4 weeks.
Yep.
And then, like you said, George Pickens is up and down. So I declare you the winner of that trade. I apologize only because I think John Dahlgren is cursed this year. That is very apparent.
Yeah.
Mr. Stoll, are you ready to do the rundown? Because I only have the demo version of Zoom, so they don't give me unlimited time. You ready to do this?
All right, let's do it.
Okay, let's go. It's week 10, very pivotal matchups, and we got some bye weeks happening. Philadelphia Eagles are one of the big teams missing, so there's no Hurts, no Swift, no A.J. Brown. No Devontae Smith. All those guys are gone. And that plays a big factor in this game. Myself, Red Hot Jabrili Peppers, going up against Joe Murdoch, who now is creeping up the standings, just like he did last year. And he's in the top 3 in scoring as well at 7th place, 4-5. I have some bye issues. I'm missing Tyreek Hill. I'm missing Devontae Smith. And it's pretty much the Joe Burrow show with a bunch of flex players and Derrick Henry. I know where I'm going to lean, but looking at this matchup, give me your quick response. Who do you think's going to win?
I think with your bye players out, I think it's going to be tough for you to pull this off. Joe's got like Deontay Johnson. And Taylor Heineke. Heineke plays Arizona, but Deontay Johnson, it's just Kenny Pickett. But Alvin Kamara has been one of those guys steady. Dude's dominating. Same with Saquon. He does play Dallas, which Dallas put a 40 burger and shut the Giants out last time they played. So it's kind of iffy. But his running backs are just way better. Roddy White, Barkley, Kamara. I like Dalton Kincaid a lot. And then Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to have a tough game against San Francisco. San Francisco lost themselves after they stomped Dallas. Then they lost 3 straight. They went into the bye week. I think they're going to retool. I think Jacksonville's going to have a really hard time. So Calvin really might get locked up. But the running back position for him is just stronger, I think. So I'm going to lean his way with your big guys out on bye this week.
Yes, unfortunately, I agree. This is a good time for Joe to strike, even though besides the Eagles, the Dolphins are on bye too. So that's no Tyreek Hill, no Tua, no Waddle. Those are going to play factors in other games. All right, let's move on to, well, we know the outcome of this one. Dan Nickel, 5-4, taking on Nick Shook at 3-6 in 10th place. Is this even going to be close once Nick figures out his lineup?
If Nick figures out his lineup, it could be Joe Mixon, and then Jahad Dotson are good players. They've been pretty consistent, but I don't have any confidence that he's going to get his lineup together, because you look at Dan's team, like Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore. His wide receivers kind of stink. He's got good running backs. Jonathan Taylor, Tony Pollard, and Jamar Gibbs can absolutely carry the team. But in the coin flip league we're playing in right now, anything could happen. But the fact that I'm looking at this lineup and I'm looking at better players on the bench, and I have zero confidence that that's going to change.
Yes.
I think even if it does change, I think I lean Dan, his running backs, the consistency. Jahmyr Gibbs, my goodness. Montgomery went down, and the Lions are like, oh, this guy's actually pretty good. So, and obviously Jonathan Taylor coming back full force is nice. And, Tony Pollard, and then Jake Ferguson as well. Jake Ferguson, I think it took a while for him to take off. He's found his spot. He's still a little bit of drop issues, but Dallas is utilizing him a lot. That helps Dan, so Dan's got the edge.
Yeah, and it's not even projected to be like a blowout, but once he sets his lineup, but right now it is. Speaking of kind of a close score and snake-bitten team, John Dahlgren, 5-4, taking on the very, very last place. Adam Barris is working from Mahomes. I think this might be a potential spoiler. looking at this matchup. Even though John is projected to win, I think it really hinges on, is John Connor going to be fully participant in this week's game for the Cardinals? That's a big deal because he was on IR for him for a while. Who are you leaning in this matchup? Do you smell a potential upset, or does Dahlgren get back on track?
I think Dahlgren can get back on track here. I don't love the Michael Thomas Taysom Hill stack on the other side. Michael Thomas also had a really bad game. It's nice that Josh Jacobs has figured himself out. He remembered how to play football. I think Kittle can have a big game, but Deebo Samuel is back. So, looking over at Dahlgren, I think Njoku has figured it out. Kenneth Walker coming back in, Drake London coming back in. And then I don't know who John Connor is. I mean, he does save us from
James
Terminator.
I was just watching T2. I'm sorry,
No.
James Conner.
John Connor is probably going to do us all a good favor at some point. But James Conner, coming back to be big. Kyler Murray comes back too, which is helpful. So I think James Conner has a good chance to make an impact if he's healthy. Now, you just hate, any lower body injuries to the running backs. You're always skeptical about what they may be able to do. So he's got 4 Qs on his players. Well, if he's truly cursed, and what would most likely happen is, we're going to give it a run, and then I aggravate it first quarter after 3 plays, I'm out. So,
yes.
which is terrible. But I think, just looking at that, I think he's got an edge. I think he can do it. But if he's got those 4 Qs on there, if they're not healthy, it's gonna hurt.
Yeah, and Patrick Mahomes having a very okay year does not help Barris, and plus Puka is also on bye. So yeah, I was gonna lean upset for Barris, but I don't think that's gonna happen. Let's move on to your matchup. As one of the teams mentioned as possibly a championship contender, Jabil's Modelo virus without a quarterback. Jalen Hurts is on bye, is taking on the 2-7 Dak Street Boys, riding the hot streak with CJ Stroud. We don't have a quarterback yet for Jabil's team. I assume he's going to pick somebody off the waivers. Does that matter? Will that tilt the result? Who wins?
I think the biggest thing, it's going to come down to Jamar Chase's health. He's banged up. He hasn't been practicing. He's projected as a 20-point. And I mean, with the Bengals offense playing the way it is, it's a possibility. But so he's a non-participant yesterday because of a back issue.
Yeah.
And then T. Higgins is a hamstring issue. So,
Pay attention, Barris. Start Tyler Boyd instead of Michael Thomas. Sorry.
It's kind of going to depend on that. And then, I mean, I'm looking at Najee Harris being a starter against Green Bay. Najee Harris is like, yuck. I'm sure he'll light me up for dropping him. I think Mondre Stevenson is good. And then it's, Dalton Schultz. The Texans, absolutely, that game was so fun to watch. I mean, them coming back in like 46 seconds, Tank Dell. But I'm actually in a personal dilemma myself because I look at what the Bengals have been doing on defense. Hubbard, Hendrickson, their defense has found it, figured out how to play again. Like coupled with the offense, I think they personally kind of trounced the Bills, who I would argue is, they're having an up and down year themselves, but they contain Josh Allen really well with Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Dalton Kincaid. CJ Stroud being a first-year player, he had a great game, but is the Bengals defense going to do enough to hem him? And my dilemma comes because Kyler Murray comes back, and he's playing Atlanta, who lost to Josh Dobbs, who was signed earlier that week and wasn't even supposed to play, then came in.
He didn't know the names of the players.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, it's like Kyler Murray's probably going to be limited in some sense of his running, but it's also Kyler Murray.
Yes.
And apparently he's been locked in this offseason. He's, he's kind of ready to go, showcase what he's got.
Playing less Call of Duty. Yep.
You're right, exactly. So, like, I kind of have a little bit of a dilemma as far as my starting quarterback because I think it'll matter. Like, I have to start making these close decisions if I want to try and get, inch my way back in.
Yes.
I think I have a chance to win this game, but it does stink that Zach Moss is now kind of on the downturn.
Yeah.
Of course, Isaiah Pacheco's on bye. So I'll have to try and figure out if I want him to start or if I want to just roll the dice on McLaughlin from Denver, the rookie who's, has been doing well. And then, in a funny turn of events, I actually benched Devontae Adams because I think the Jets they're like triple covering Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
Like he had 7 points last week and I was reading about the coverages he was facing. It's like, they're making the Raiders try and beat teams without him.
Yeah.
Debo comes back after a bye. The Niners are reeling. I think Debo's primed for a big game, so I plugged him in. Sam Laporta comes back with the high flying offense of the Detroit. I think it'll be close, honestly.
Yes.
Because I think Cincinnati's going to do a good job of hemming Houston, and it depends on who I start. But that means Dalton Schultz will suffer because, he had a great game last week, but that's because the offense was flying. But
yeah,
different defense this week. Jamar Chase injury, question mark. And then, like I said, Najee Harris against Green Bay. I'm not confident in Najee Harris. And then the other thing will be just does Brandon Ayuk blow up because Debo's back and it's gonna, the Niners are trying to figure themselves out. So I think it's going to be really close.
But who are you leaning? Who are you taking?
I think I have to lean Jable just because his players have a better chance as far as like running. Like Zach Moss is just like a huge question mark for me.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a hamstringing.
I'm picking you this week. What do you think about that? We're going to split on this one. I think that because of Jable's quarterback situation, he's going to have to go desperate on the waiver wire. Speaking of the waiver wire, Nick Shook is active. I just got an alert. He's actually putting a team together. So there you go. Look at that.
Look at that.
Live in time. Okay, next matchup. This is my game of the week for week 10. It is Mick, 6-3. He's in 4th place, taking on a very hot team, Abalash Reddy, at 4-5. He's in 8th place, but he's just right on the outside looking in. And he's been riding high with the old CeeDee Lamb Dak stack that's been getting him some big wins for your Cowboys. Who do you think is going to take this game? Abalash projected by 2 points. Which team's going to win this one?
I think just based on the matchups, Abalash is going to win it. The Dak CD stack is, CD says he wants the ball. Next thing you know, he's getting 10 catches a game for almost 200 yards. They're playing the Giants. They just came off a really tough loss to the Eagles. Like, they probably should have won the game. Of course they didn't. I think that's just going to fire him up. The Giants are reeling. I think, we could see another huge performance from Dallas, which will kind of hurt him, but I think it's going to be Dak Prescott, it's going to be CeeDee Lamb. They're going to jump out ahead really fast, and then they'll rest down the stretch, but it'll be enough damage. And then, Bijan against Arizona, I think is a good matchup. I think Breece Hall against Vegas is a good matchup. And I think DK against Washington, who sold their pass rushers. Geno Smith's and they had an abysmal game themselves. So
yeah,
it's almost like you want to bet on the players that had their team had really bad games because for the most part, as long as the matchup's okay, they're going to bounce back. Versus, Trevor Lawrence against San Francisco, who they just got Chase Young. They have Nick Bosa. The defense is getting asked questions about them. I'm sure Fred Warner's got those dudes fired up to play. Yeah. Same with the offense. I think Jacksonville's good, but I think San Francisco has something to prove. So his matchup's tough. Stephon Diggs could get locked up by Surtain. Gabe Davis could have a big game.
Yes.
And then I look at the running back situation. David Montgomery and Justice Hill. I mean, David Montgomery was doing really well. He got hurt. Jahmyr Gibbs showcased he's incredible. What does that mean for him? I think the Lions would be silly to do what the Falcons are doing with Bijan a little bit and like cuffing him, but
yes,
who knows? And the same thing, matchup problem. Tank Dell against Cincinnati. Looking at Tank Dell's matchups, he had a great game, obviously last week, but will he replicate it again against the Bengals, who have really, popped off? Because here's Tank Dell's previous stat lines. He had 2 points against Pittsburgh, 8 points against Atlanta, 0 against New Orleans. They went on a bye. Then he had 6 points against Carolina. He had a nice matchup against Tampa. So he scored.
Yeah.
I think he's more of a downtrend guy. He just had a really good game. And then Cincy, I think their defense is pretty good. So I think Abalash is, just based on matchups, I think he's got a better chance of winning for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take Mick this week. We're splitting again. I think Mick is actually going to pull it off. I'm looking at some big performances out of him. Okay, I just got the, cheapskate, you need to pay for the full Zoom version alert. So we only have a few more minutes left. So let's go over the last matchup, which probably shouldn't take too long because poor Anurag, Dr. Anurag Reddy, is in bye week hell this week. He's without DeAndre Swift. He's without Jalen Waddle. He's without a bunch of defensive players. He's in trouble. He needs to go to the waiver wire. I don't even know what his projection is going to be, but this is a week for Plow where he could potentially position himself into second place and move to 7-3 as he's locked in with the likes of Lamar Jackson, who's having a pretty good year. Is there any doubt that Plow's going to win this week?
Yes, because Christian McCaffrey comes off bye week. He's just not plugged into the lineup.
Oh, yeah,
Christian McCaffrey's back. Brian Robinson, that's been a big game. Like I said, Gabe Davis against Denver. Stephon Diggs could get locked up by Surtain. The Bills have something to prove.
Yes.
I think Gabe Davis could have a big game.
He did.
I don't know why he's got Gus Edwards on the bench. Gus Edwards has been a touchdown scoring machine.
Yeah, Gus Bus.
He's got 21 points, 28 points, 17 points last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as Anurag doesn't pull a shook, then this match, it looks abysmal, but he's got such great players on the bench that he could easily fix this. Justin Herbert against Detroit, you expect to be a shootout. Gabe Davis in for Jalen Waddle, so that's one bye week player. T. Higgins is question mark for he's hurt. DeAndre Swift bye player. Oh, let me just plug in CMC. All right. Aaron Jones against Pittsburgh, easy. Tight end, I don't love. Marquise Brown, he gets Kyler Murray back. What do you know? Tyler Bass is a point machine. Aaron Donald's on bye. Well, let me just plug in Jahan Hargrave from San Francisco. He's a pretty good player. Gus Edwards is a great play. You could put T. Higgins out, and you could put the Gus Bus in on your flex, and suddenly you're off and running. And then you look over at, the other side here. Alexander Mattison, I'm not thrilled against New Orleans. Jamal Williams against Buffalo. Denver, I'm not thrilled. Courtland Sutton, I mean, good Lord. Anything Denver offense, I'm always uncertain of. Garrett Wilson, was Zach Wilson play? I mean, I don't know. I mean, your only steady players is Lamar and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah,
that's
who
it.
Comes off the bye. So, is it safe to say I can sound the upset alarm for Dr. Anurag?
As long as he sets his lineup, it takes 2 minutes. Yes, I think so. I think he can win this game. I think he absolutely win. CMC being back is huge.
Yes. Yeah, and you're right. The 49ers have been on a slide, and they are in a bit of an identity crisis, especially on defense. And there's some inevitably, I knew this was going to happen. Brock Purdy was going to show some cracks and get the blame for anything that goes bad. But CMC is, 17 games in a row? He scored a touchdown? What's the streak? It's unreal. He scores a touchdown every single game. It's
unbelievable. Guess what? He's going to get freed up a little bit because Debo's back.
Yeah.
Having that added element just helps him so much. I mean, like I said, if he cleans up, he just gets into his lineup and fixes it, I think he wins. I think he wins, and it might not be close either.
Wow. There we go. I love it when our guests come on and do the upset alert. That is great. Well, Mr. Stoll, thank you. Always in-depth analysis, bring in the stats. bringing the knowledge, bringing the Hoffa-stank and the scent of victory 3 times. Any last words before we go into week 10 here?
I think, with my previous 2 seasons, how they've gone this year, last year, now as long as I can make the draft, I figured out the league has upped their draft game, which is good.
Yes.
I'm glad, like I said, I'm really glad the $100 I paid reinvigorated this league, because a lot of people were expressing doubt of, I won 3 straight times and everyone was like, oh gosh. But, the league's reinvigorated. So I'm happy to help that part. But now that everyone's invigorated, it's time to crush some souls. Maybe not this year, but I need to bring my A game for sure next year.
So do I have to plan the draft 2 years ahead of time this time, Mr. Stoll?
At least 3 months ahead, because that's how far my schedule
It was
out.
like 6 months ahead of time. I scheduled it in like February.
Yeah, you might be right. So yeah, I think I just messed up.
Yes.
But
well, thank you. I apologize to you. Thank you for apologizing to me about this. We missed you at the draft, by the way. Awesome. Thank you for being on this week's episode. Good luck to you. Good luck to the rest of the league. And I guess we're going to have a Thanksgiving special next week before I go under the knife for hip surgery. So tune in for that. Thank you, Mr. Stoll.